Okay, all right. Hello there. Hello. I'm here today with a very hot topic, maybe a bit too hot for somebody, and that is Norskprøve, right? Let's talk about Norskprøve today. And that's because yesterday was the publication date for the results from the previous run, from the September exam dates. And next Monday, or this Monday rather, the 28th of October, is the start of registration for the December round, which is the next one. So this is a timely live stream. I think we need to talk about Norskprøve in the aftermath of the result publication, and also in a time when many of you might be considering applying or registering for the next date. And I want to talk about what Norskprøve is testing, and I'll be focusing on the muntlig, on the oral exam. Some of the considerations are similar for the other part, and definitely, if you want to know about the other parts, let me know. I might do a live stream separately about, for example, the listening part, the reading part, or the written part. All of those are very interesting to talk about, and all of them have some surprises in them in relation to what people commonly believe is being tested, right? So that's interesting too. I will focus on the muntlig today because that's what most of my students, most of people who talk to me are interested in, and interested in taking as well. Because ultimately, if you're thinking of things like, for example, the citizenship application or things like that, then all you actually need is the muntlig B1, right? That's the thing that most people are interested in and also fear the most, because it's this kind of exposed situation. You are there in the exam, a number of things can go wrong. So that's what I want to talk about. All right. So I mentioned the dates. The registration date for the next round is on Monday, the 28th. An interesting fun fact is that it opens 9 o'clock, and usually in the Oslo area, at least within half an hour or an hour, the first batch of spots tends to be gone. So if you want to register without additional stress, I recommend waiting with your finger on the button at 9 a.m. ready to press the button, because within an hour or something like that, the spots might be gone. They tend to add another batch of spots later on, especially if people call them or write to them that, like, I wanted to register, I didn't get a spot. So they tend to add the spots, but you never know if they will or if they won't and when. So if you want to do it, be registered without additional stress. I really recommend, like, I'm not saying taking a day off, but maybe arranging at work or something so that you actually can physically register at 9 o'clock or like 9:05, because it will save you some stress. That's just a technical pro tip to begin with, right? Especially big cities like the Oslo area is notorious for not having enough spots, right? And then the next exam date, it's always a week. So this time is the beginning of December. The winter date, it's from the 2nd until the 6th. And then which day in that week it will be, it depends. You just register now, and you know that you will get a date, you will get a slot within that range. So it's up for them to somehow make sense of the candidates and like order them somehow, right? So that's the date. And that also means the fact that the registration is now and that the winter date is at the beginning of December. That gives you approximately 1 month of prep time. And a lot can be done during a month. So that's why I also want to talk about it now rather than a week before the exam, because now you still have a month or a month and a week or something like that to practice. And if you know what you're getting ready for, then you can use that month very efficiently and you can take it quite far. It's not like you can raise half a level with your actual language skills. But most of my students, most of the people who approach me to, for example, get a consultation about Norskprøve or just to get a short assessment of like, do I have a shot at this term or not. Most of my students don't have the problem of not being good enough at Norwegian. They have the problem of being insecure around what's being tested, and in like a lack of strategies for the exam itself, because it's an exam, it's not the most natural of situations. And then of course you have the self-confidence question, which is hard if you're a shy person, or if you tend to freeze a little bit under stress, and it happens even when you want to talk to your colleagues. Then during the exam this tends to get much worse, right? So you need to be ready for the exam itself. So that's what most of my students need to work on, getting ready for the exam as it is, and for the task types, right? So that's that. And a month is plenty of time to do that. It's not plenty of time to raise half a level in your language skills. So if your level is like A1, you don't have a shot at the B1 this time, right? You need to work a bit more and take it later. But usually, if you're somewhere around the level, which most people who are considering it actually are without realizing it, then it's kind of important also maybe to get that assessment done, and know that, all right, I actually do have a shot this time, and I just need to know what I'm doing, right? So let's talk a little bit about first about what happens if you already attempted Norskprøve, if you took the September round and it didn't turn out the way you wanted it to or needed it to, because we will talk about the psychological aspect of taking the exam later on, but this actually is about that a little bit. That most of my students, the majority of my student group are highly educated people who are professionals in their fields. Psychologically speaking, in this group, it's even much harder than for other adults to kind of put up with the fact that, all right, so I did not get the result I wanted, right? It feels like a failure. There are feelings of shame attached to that, even if they are subconscious, even consciously. If consciously we feel fine and we feel like, oh, okay, it's okay, I'm gonna try next time, there is this thing happening because there is a mismatch between what you've been used to for many years now of like performing well in your particular field that you're good at in the first place, and now you get this message of like, no, Norwegian isn't good enough, right? Of course, the exam, even though it's supposed to be like the most accurate measurement of your actual level that we have available, it's still a short performance there and then that's being evaluated, right? So sometimes it happens that your level is higher than what you performed. Often that happens because you are stressed. If you have this freezing thing going on, right, brain fog things going on, a lot of people have that. You might have underperformed compared to where your level actually is, right? That's one thing. Another thing is, like, even if your level actually isn't there yet and you got that message from the evaluator at Norskprøve, we tend to take that very personally and feel that very deeply. We are not used to kind of failing things anymore, right? That's something we were maybe doing at university, but not so much. Like, it's been long since we had to sit exams. So there is this aspect. So I know many people get like not only disappointed, of course you're disappointed, but many people feel it's like it's about them and I can never make it, and like there is this wave, yeah? So when you let this wave pass, then you need to take some action steps to get ready for the next time, and that's very important. So that's my first very practical hands-on tip that I want to give you about Norskprøve. Not many people know this. It is stated on the Kompetanse Norge website, but it's really hard to read it like from top to bottom and to find all the things. But it says there that you cannot complain about the results of muntlig. You can complain about the written part if you want. It depends on, like, usually you don't get a better result when you complain. You might, usually you don't, right? But you can try. But for the muntlig, you cannot complain about the results because it happened there and then, like I said, and then it's gone. They don't record it, so there is no way to reassess. But what you can do is to ask to see a copy of the evaluation sheet. They have something when you are sitting the exam, you have the examiner, you have the censor. The examiner talks to you and the censor takes a lot of notes and smiles occasionally, right? And the thing the censor is writing into is this evaluation sheet or vurderingsskjema, right? And it has all these different categories that they look at. And we're going to get into these categories a bit later when we talk about what you're being assessed on when you take Norskprøve. It's not your grammar, or just, it is your grammar too, but it's not just your grammar as people commonly believe. So this evaluation sheet that has all these categories in them, and you're supposed to be evaluated in all of these, right? You have the right to get insight into that if you apply for it. So they do not send this automatically because it's a lot of administration and extra work and everything, but they have to sit on these for a year after you take the exam. So anytime during that year, and I recommend now, today, of course, right? You can write to them or call them and ask to get a copy of that sheet so that you can see what was the cause of you not getting the level that you wanted. You can see that you get maybe the A2 and you wanted B1. Maybe you can see you got it in all the categories. You can see that you got it in just some of them, right? And these categories, they are maybe like 5 or 6 depending how they split it exactly. I haven't seen that particular vurderingsskjema. I've seen many others, and it will typically have like 5 to 6 to 7 maybe, depending how much in detail you go in the splitting categories that you will get evaluated on, right? So this can give you a lot of insight. I will also open a few slots for one-off consultations a bit later. So if you want to, for example, prepare for the task types, but you feel like, okay, I'm almost ready, I think I'm at the level, but I need a little bit of help, or you get your hands on this vurderingsskjema, which I do recommend for anybody who took the exam and didn't get the level you wanted. Or even if you did get the level you wanted, you can ask for it anyhow. But especially if you didn't, ask for it, have it sent to you. And if you want, you can book a one-off consultation. I can help you interpret what that means. That's on the schema, right? Or just get ready in general. So that's a possibility. Or maybe you will just have a look at it and you will understand. It might be clear what it's saying, that maybe the problem was not your grammar as you thought. Most people think the problem must be the grammar. Maybe it was your vocabulary range. Or some people do this thing that I call approximate formulations, that they would say something that kind of sounds like it, but none of the words are quite exactly the words as they are in real life. So that's a vocabulary problem, isn't it? That you know what the word kind of sounds like, but not exactly. If you do too much of that, it might drag your level down. And that's something that people are not aware of doing. And then when you see that, oh, I thought grammar must have been my problem, which means I'm preparing for the next round by drilling my grammar. If you ask for the schema and you see that maybe your grammar was evaluated as B1, but your vocabulary range and accuracy dragged you down, like, oh, what's that, right? And then you might get targeted help for that. So that's something very important I want to say. If you already didn't get your level as you wanted, do ask for that vurderingsskjema. They don't say on their website, and I think they do this on purpose because they don't want to be overwhelmed by the demand. Yeah, but they don't say how you should ask for it. They just say contact your exam place. So I would just go for an email plus a phone call and just get in contact with them and ask for it, and maybe get help interpreting what it says, right? So that's very important. Being like, not I'm the worst person in the world. I could have said something differently. I should have studied more. you shouldn't have and you couldn't have because you didn't, right? That's the reality of our lives. That's it. It's completely neutral. Now get the schema and figure out the strategy. It's very important to think like that and not be like, oh, I should have, and it's on me, right? What's on you is the strategy forward. So that's very, very important. All right. Next thing is what's being tested, and that's the categories I was talking about. This is extremely important to think of when you're heading for the exam, right? Most of my students want to attack the B1 level, get the B1 certified because of the citizenship or some things at work. So the B1 level tends to be the most demanded one, right? Some of my students head for a higher level than that, but mostly it's the B1 in the first run. And what's being tested is the same in all these levels on a theoretical level. The categories are the same. Of course, the higher the level, the more how to put this, like the more they want from you in each category, right? When you're taking A1, then basically if you make yourself understood, you can get it, right? If you have enough vocabulary to make yourself understood about those basic topics that they ask about, you will get it. If your pronunciation doesn't hinder communication in a big time, you will get it. Yeah. So A2 is kind of easier to get, but then there's a huge leap from that to B1. So that's not linear progression at all. And for B1, that's an independent level. Yeah. The B level signifies like language independence, right? So what you're being tested for overall in B1 is that you are an emerging independent speaker, right? In B2, you are a fully independent speaker. That's why, for example, if you see these language categories, if you want to put your languages on LinkedIn, for example, it doesn't use this common European framework of reference of like A1 until C2, but it uses things like professional working proficiency or things like that. Yeah, elementary proficiency, working proficiency, professional working proficiency. So working proficiency on LinkedIn would correspond to B1, right? And professional working proficiency would correspond to B2, right? Full professional proficiency would correspond to the C level, C1 and higher. Yeah, like if you have C2, you could call it native like, bilingual or native like. Yeah, but the point is the B level, already B1, signifies an independent speaker, meaning that in basically any situation that you encounter, you are able to somehow make it work and you are at a certain level. In B2, you are expected to make it work even if the situations are a bit out of the ordinary. If it's something more specialized, you are required to maybe understand specialized vocabulary when it's put into context, to figure it out from context, things like that. So that's not the case in B1. But in B1, it's technically speaking a much higher level than A2. It's not like the increments are the same between these levels. Yeah, so you have to show independence in your speaking in the muntlig. And now the categories in which you need to show that language independence. That's for one, the answer to the question that you get. And they are nice. They tend to say it twice and they say it slowly. Still, you might misunderstand the question because you can't see it in writing. They just say it, but they tend to be nice about it and not make it unnecessarily difficult for you, right? But when you get the question, so one big category that they look at is how well you understood, if you understood, and how relevant in terms of content your answer was to that question. It's not about academic knowledge, not at all. Some other types of Norwegian exams might include something called pensum, which is a pre-agreed literature list that you would have studied, and you might be tested on some facts. Yeah, it doesn't tend to be heavy on those facts either, because it's more of a language exam, but some exams might include that. Norskprøve doesn't. So in Norskprøve, you are not going to get tested on facts, at least not directly. Sometimes it helps a lot if you know what it is about. So I know that, for example, for many of my students, they were stressed that they might get this kindergarten kind of topic, because in Norskprøve they ask a lot of questions in writing and in speaking that are relevant for families with small kids, because a lot of us have small kids and it's a common situation in the society that you need to deal with. But you don't have to deal with it if you're not a parent, right? So those of my students who are not parents, all of them are like, oh, I hope I won't get this kiddo question, or like, you are supposed to organize a children's birthday. Yeah, what are you gonna do for the pair task, for example? Or you need to, I don't know, like write to the kindergarten system and ask for all your kids to be put in the same kindergarten because you are driving around town each morning. This is good for somebody who has that kind of situation at home, who has a kindergartner. If you don't have, or they ask you maybe in the speaking, should all kids go to kindergarten? And you're like, how the hell do I know? I never think of small kids in my life, you know? So it can be hard, and it helps if you have studied this kind of kindergarten system and, you know, the systems with small kids in Norway, because then you have more vocabulary, you have more material for your thoughts. Yeah. So sometimes people really get thrown off because they get a topic that they are unfamiliar with and they don't know what they should say. Yeah, so it is a danger, and of course some kind of knowledge of especially social studies does help, but it's not required. It is allowed to say, jeg har ikke barn, så jeg skal fortelle hva jeg tror og tenker og synes, men ikke sant? Jeg har ikke erfaring, right? If you say something like that, fair enough, they take it. You don't have to give them facts. But, and back, this is a digression as is common for me, back to the main point that your answer has to be relevant. It doesn't have to contain a lot of facts, but you must be answering the question. So if they ask about kindergarten and you're like, oh shit, I don't know anything about kindergarten, so you start about something like with kids at home, right? That's a bad choice, because they want you to talk about the stuff or react to the stuff they asked about. And it's very important because you show communicative abilities by doing that. So if you don't know, you need to tell them like directly, okay, this kindergarten thing, it's an interesting question. I'll try to reflect on this. I don't have kids myself, but from the example of my colleagues who have kids, I can judge that, whatever, right? So you need to keep it to the topic. It's very important. It's a big category that they look at. So communicative ability and answering the question in a relevant way. Yeah, so not like listing facts and dates and numbers, but being relevant and to the point. Yeah, because that shows that you understood and that you can communicate clearly. All right. And how understandable your answer is as well. That's a big category. And of course, if it's A2, then like if they got what you said, it's enough. In B1, it's already like if they don't understand what you're saying, you're not gonna get B1, right? And if they have to struggle to understand, then you also might not get B1, depending on how much they struggled. Because in B1, you don't have to be like super intricate about your formulations or get into super big details, or you can be a little vague still at that level, it's okay. But if the other party, if the listener has to struggle badly to figure out what you're saying, then that's somewhere between the levels rather than B1, right? At B2, the listener shouldn't struggle at all to understand what you're saying, right? So if you're taking B2 and the listener is unsure multiple times what it was you were actually saying, it's not gonna be B2. So that's like a rule of thumb in the understandability. A2, if you make yourself kind of understood, they got what you said, it's A2, it's okay. B1, they shouldn't struggle to understand. B2, they should always be sure what you were trying to say. If they have to work for understanding what you might have meant, it's more like lower down. All right, so that's a rule of thumb for the understanding, and these are big categories for them. This is very important. So being relevant, answering the question to the point. You can digress and things like that, but you need to be answering what they asked you about in the first place, and you need to be understandable. And at B1 level, I would say being easily understandable is the goal, right? Not at the cost of using only 5 words the whole time. That's another category that we'll get into, but you need to be understandable for the other party. Now, the language related, or all of this is language related, but we could say that the first category is content related, right? Relevance and understandability is like content. And then the language, more technical categories, language related categories that they list literally on the website of Kompetanse Norge, those would be flyt, which means fluency. So fluency means how, not fast, but how naturally you speak, in terms of that you're not stopping and thinking and fluency. Many people think that fluency means complete correctness and native likeness. That is not true. Fluency is this dimension that is about how naturally the words flow out of you. Many people are fully fluent without being very accurate with the grammar or vocabulary, right? And even native speakers, or basically all native speakers, unless they have something psychologically maybe going on or the subject is difficult for them, but almost all native speakers are always fluent. But even native speakers might speak, let's say, badly. Yeah, the other native speakers would say like, this person uses loads of fill words, they have wrong flexion, they don't know how to use this word properly, they are not very sophisticated, right? So they might have, even native speakers might have accuracy issues with vocabulary and even some specific things in grammar, but all of them are fluent unless they kind of struggle to speak for other reasons, right? So that's fluency. They look at that. And again, there is this scale. At A2, you can take a lot of thinking breaks. Actually, it's going to be okay. If you get the sentence out, it's going to be okay. B1, relative fluency is already required. So if you stop to think between all right. We'll see. Hopefully, I'm back. That was very weird. My internet crashed, but I'll try to say the thing I was saying last one more time so that you don't miss the information. Hopefully, yeah, I will cut it out later. Okay, so I was just saying about the fleet, about fluency, that A2 level, if you manage to get your sentences out, it's basically okay. B1 level, relative fluency is required. So that means words are flowing out of you in a more or less natural fashion. B2, almost full fluency, would be the goal. You can, of course, stop a little bit to think here and there, but if you sit there thinking most of the time, fishing for vocabulary, it's not gonna be B2 in that category, all right? Then another category that they list is uttale, pronunciation. And again, there is this scale, right? At A2, if you make yourself understood, if your pronunciation doesn't hinder communication in a big way, you will pass that category at A2 level. B1 level, you should be closer to native like. So it must be easy to understand you at B1 level, right? If pronunciation hinders understanding by the other party, then that's not the desired outcome at B1 level. B2 level, again, it should be very easy for the listening party to understand you. You should know about the basic pronunciation rules. You shouldn't sound like you are reading it from your book based on your other languages. Yeah. So B2 should be pretty native like. And completely native like is never required. It might not be your goal either, but it must be easy to understand you. So at B1, it should be relatively easy to understand you, fairly easy. B2 level should be very easy to understand you based on pronunciation, right? So that's the pronunciation dimension. Some people get the A2 in this category without being aware of it, because pronunciation is something that makes us adults very conscious sometimes, especially if there's a big difference between Norwegian and our language. And we think we're doing it kind of right and neutrally, when for the Norwegian ear, it's actually very, very off, and it might be more difficult to understand because of that. Yeah. So it's not about the color or like the nationality in a way, like signs that show up in your pronunciation. That's not a problem as long as it's not hindering understanding for the other party. But sometimes we don't know which things these are that we should invest in fixing. Sometimes we think what everybody has to fix the for example, because it was in the textbook. Sometimes it's other features of pronunciation that you should attack first, because they are making it seriously difficult for the other party to understand you. One of these for my student group, for educated people, is that you use a lot of these Latin based words, and these are common in English and in Norwegian. They have very similar spelling even, but pronouncing these Latin based words in English takes them very far from the Latin thing, from the spelling. And if you keep the English pronunciation in these words, then it's very difficult to actually understand you. So you think you're doing well, you're using clever words, using them spot on, but the examiner and the censor are struggling to figure out what you're saying, because these are long words, with suffixes and whatever, and they don't know what you're saying. So if you have somebody working with you, this is something you can happily fix within a month, for example. But you must know it. You must know that pronunciation is your struggle. You must know that this maybe is your major focus in that area, rather than fixing whatever there was in the textbook that might not be that relevant, because it doesn't hinder communication in an equal fashion. Yeah. So that's the other category, uttale. Then the next category that they list is ordforråd, which means vocabulary range. And in also ordforråd, it's vocabulary, vocabulary. And then this one, depending on the vurderingsskjema that they use, could be split into two. Still, it could be split into vocabulary range, meaning how broad your vocabulary is if you know a lot of vocabulary. And then vocabulary accuracy, and that means, like, do you say, for example, do trouble or make trouble? right? That's a vocabulary accuracy thing in English. For example, you have this phrasing, like, is it like do research or make research, right? Is it do trouble or make trouble? How should you know? Like, do and make translate as the same if you look in a dictionary in many languages, right? Norwegian could be the same. Like, should you say lage or gjøre? Or if you use a word, could be any word like erfaring or whatnot, are you using it correctly? So not only do you know the word, that would be a vocabulary range thing, yeah, but also are you using it correctly? Are you using it spot on? Are you phrasing things correctly as they should be or not? Now, building vocabulary range and building vocabulary accuracy, those are, of course, time consuming projects that you have to work on incrementally and consume a lot of sources. Excuse me. But it's good knowing, yeah, that, for example, the fact that you didn't make any mistakes doesn't mean it's gonna be B1, because maybe the cost that you paid for not making any mistakes was using just a few very basic words, and that drags you down in vocabulary range, right? You didn't have the range that you should have had at that level. So that's another one, ordforråd. And then comes grammatic, right? Grammar. And in grammar, again, they look at both the number of structures that you have at your disposal. So that means the range, grammar range, that you are able to show some variation. If you formulate super simple sentences all the time, you don't even use ikke for fear of placing it wrong, right? And you just go like subject, verb, and a little bit of the rest, then you go next sentence. It's not gonna be B1 because you haven't shown any structural range. And they look at this especially in writing, of course, but in speaking too, to a certain degree. And then, of course, accuracy, grammatical accuracy. And grammatical accuracy is, of course, important. It is telling of your level, or it's correlated to your level overall, of course. But it's not like you take a grammar test and based on that, we can tell your communicative ability, right? That's ridiculous. But still, informed by old tests or by placement tests, or informed by the prioritizing that you saw in your Norwegian course, maybe, students still tend to overestimate this particular aspect, grammatical accuracy, and take it as a proxy for all the rest, or they are even not aware that there is any rest, right? They just say, for example, like in Norskprøve, I went there and I said et godt oppgave. And then I realized that the gender wasn't matching. Was supposed to be an oppgave. Now I'm not gonna get the B1. That's not how it works at all. Yeah. What they look at, of course, the sensor will register that you said et oppgave instead of an oppgave, for example. But they will take notes and they will see at the balance, right? How these things balance each other out. You said et oppgave, okay, that was wrong, but maybe you had the gender right most of the time with other words, right? You might have made a mistake and said, like, for example, you said something like gikk when what you meant was ga, yeah? So you mistook the words in the past tense. They will surely take note of that because they are trained, they take note of everything. But again, the fact that you had this slip and that you made the mistake that you later realized, that's not a reason for you to get one level lower just because you made that one mistake. People very commonly believe that, like, I said this and that's something we did in that course level, that means I can't get the level, right? Or you make mistakes like that, then you see that you did not get the level you wanted, you get one lower, and you're like, oh, it's because of that. Well, maybe you made a lot of grammatical mistakes and it might have been the reason that your grammatical accuracy dragged you down. Sometimes it happens. But it might not have been the reason, or it might not have been the sole reason why it happened. So that's why I'm saying, again, if you already took Norskprøve in September or earlier, you did not get the level you desired, you need to contact your exam place and ask for the vurderingsskjema. You have the right to see that. They are obliged to send you a copy if you ask about it. They don't have any schema or anything like that, any form to fill. They just say contact your exam place. I don't think they want people to know because of the administrative burden, right? But you have the right to see that, do it, see it, because you might be proven right. You will see that, okay, it was the grammar, hopefully even with some examples of the style of the thing that caused it. But you might be proven wrong. And that's very, very important information to have. Not assuming that it must have been the grammar, because grammar is what decides. No, it isn't, right? Sometimes it is, but very commonly it isn't. Or it's the grammar in combination, for example, with wrong vocabulary choices. And very often the thing that caused you to fail is not something you are aware of, right? So it's very good to have that insight. No shame, no emotions. I mean, no emotions. It's ridiculous. Of course, you're going to have emotions, but not like focusing on that line. Focus on the solutions, be analytical, be a descriptivist. This is what is, and have a look at how they evaluated your performance and then judge from there, not because I made a mistake with grammar, it must have been that, right? So very, very important. All right. Common pitfalls at muntlig norskprøve. Number one is what I just covered, overestimating the grammar, and not even the whole grammar, because everything with grammar and vocabulary, it's always range and accuracy. And people often think grammar accuracy, but it's also grammar range, and it's also vocabulary, it's the uttale. Maybe you were so focused on your grammar that you were answering the wrong question the whole time, and that's what actually caused you to get the lower level, right? So the communicative ability or something like that. So overestimating grammatical accuracy at the cost of discarding all the rest from your consideration is the most common pitfall, right? And then also, what we also talked about already is the psychological pitfall that is super relevant for highly educated candidates. That's my main student group over the years, that we are not used to failure in intellectual spheres any longer. We are used to performing. We are quite kind of advanced in our own field after all those years of working with it, and suddenly the Norwegian thing comes along and we're like, A2 B1 is actually relatively low levels, and like, oh my god, I can't even get it, and all this emotional cycle kicks in of not good enough, I failed, shame, 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 right? And this is happening largely subconsciously, but it can hinder people from doing the right thing. Like, for example, instead of contacting the exam place right after the exam, if you don't get your level, and asking to have a look at the copy of your vurderingsskjema and then get somebody to help you interpret it and prepare out of there, and just being like, all right, I'm gonna give it 2 shots then. Cool. It's not about me. It's about something I did or didn't do, but it doesn't say anything about me as a person. We kind of get stuck in the emotional bubble and we're like, oh, this is about me as a person. Who else, right? And this is extremely unfruitful, of course. And it hurts. It's paralyzing. And like, we need to get our time to get over it, but then we need to kind of act with clarity and without that much emotion. Yeah, so that's a very, very, very common pitfall. And even if we haven't failed anything, right? Even if we haven't taken the exam yet, we can be fearing the possibility of failing, of not getting that B1, for example, or that B2 that we have applied for. And if somebody asks you, like, are you fearing not getting it? You would say, no, that's ridiculous. But if you look 2 levels deeper into your emotions, into your body, like how am I feeling about this truly, then very many people actually do fear at a deep level, not at the intellectual level, but at a deep level. You fear the failure, the possibility for failure, and then all the shame comes up, and like it really hurts, it's really nasty internally. You don't want that. So there is a major block for many people, even like attempting figuring out what is being tested, how I should prepare, giving it all I have. Because if I did give it all I have and then still I didn't get the level, what would that mean about me, and we get caught in that cycle. So it's very, very important to think about these psychological pitfalls as well, because it's very, very common, in especially in my student group. Yeah. And it can be a major hindrance, can be a major block when we want to attempt the exam, right? So that's that. I'm just checking my notes here. Yes, I just want to give you a tip with this psychological thingy going on. If you feel like, okay, I have been postponing applying for the exam, I've been telling myself that I need to study for half a year more or for a year more before I'm ready, but actually you see that you're just postponing it because you might be fearing the failure at a deep level, then a good thing to do is to ask yourself, so all right, what is the worst thing that might happen, right? And really talking yourself through it. So if I take the classic example of somebody who maybe wants to apply for the citizenship, wants to get the B1, and you're like, I should study half a year more at least because I'm probably not good enough, my grammar is not there. I would say, if you failed, get somebody to assess your level informally, somebody who knows what they're doing, mind you, not a friend who doesn't know what they're doing at all. But ask somebody, like, do you think I have a shot if I practice for the exam? If they say, yes, I think you might be around that B1, be like, okay, if the thing that I'm fearing, if it happens, what is it that actually happens? And what happens actually? You apply for the exam now, you pay 1,000 kroner or whatever it costs for the muntlig, and then you get ready until December. In December, you go there, you take the exam, you see what it's like, and then you wait for the results for like 3 weeks, and they say, this is A2, it's no B1. Okay, now your nightmare has taken place. What's happening for you, right? And what's the practical implication? So this worst case scenario, in that situation of my typical student, if it happens, what is it that has happened? Okay, so I have paid 1,000 kroner or something like that for the experience. I know what it's like. I learned a lot from being there. I didn't get what I wanted. So now it's inconvenient. Yeah, I'm disappointed. I need to deal with my emotions. It's inconvenient because I need to do the whole business one more time. I need to pay the 1,000 kroner or whatever it is for the muntlig one more time. That's inconvenient. It sucks. On the other hand, if I go to Rema and do the weekly shopping of groceries for my family, it's gonna cost more than the one shot at muntlig. So it's also good to keep it at perspective that, like, okay, this is kind of wasted money. On the other hand, it was experience and I learned a lot. So it's not like super wasteful either. All right. And so probably the worst thing that happened is, one, the inconvenience. Yeah, the financial loss isn't huge, even though it sucks. And number two, it's the emotional aftermath that you need to deal with, is the feeling of shame and inadequacy that might come up. But you can prepare for that. You can do a lot for your mindset. You can work with somebody in order to mitigate that, right? So that's actually the worst case scenario, isn't it? So for many people, they postpone this for years before they try, and then they actually pass, right? Or maybe they don't pass, but if they take that as experience and act constructively, asking for the schema, checking what happened, working with a coach on the Norwegian thing, right? something like that. Like, if you do it this time, it might save you 2 years of anxiety, right? You have to do it eventually if you, for example, want the citizenship. So that would be my advice. Really run yourself through the worst case scenario, which in the case of my typical student isn't that bad. It's like, it's a major inconvenience and it does suck. I don't want to bring the experience of like not passing the level you wanted to at the first round. I don't want to take it down at all. It's there, it sucks hugely, but it's just that, yeah, it's not worse than the inconvenience and the emotions and a minor money loss. Yeah. So okay, so that's that. So let me just reiterate the most important points here. I'm getting long, but Norskprøve deserves a longer live stream than usual. So the very, very important thing is knowing what you're being tested on. It's not just grammar accuracy. It is communicative ability, answering the question in a relevant way, and being understandable with increasing demand as the level increases on what understandable means. And then the language related categories would be fluency, pronunciation, vocabulary range and accuracy, and grammar range and accuracy. So that's all the stuff you're being tested on. In the pair task, you are, of course, being tested on communication with the other party as well, on the dialogue skill, not just your own talking. By the way, the tasks, we totally don't have time to get into the particular tasks in muntlig, but I do have an individual Norskprøve program which takes approximately a month. It includes 4 one-on-one lessons, 4 exam related tasks with feedback, and video lessons on Norskprøve in general and on the tasks in particular, like the first task, the second task, the third task. Do this, don't do that, this is what they look for, this is how the task is structured. So I have all that, and doing that takes approximately that month that you have before December. So I'm gonna drop the link in the comments, or if you want to hear more, just drop me a message. I have a few spots, not very many, but I will have a few individual spots for this one. So that's an option if you want to hear more about, for example, the pair task. It's quite important as well, but that's the granular level that we don't have time for today in this live stream. All right, and then the common pitfalls in Norskprøve: taking it very personally, facing these emotional and psychological blocks, fearing failure, right, internally at a deep subconscious level, so that you don't do the right thing or you postpone it for years, and like thinking that you can't do it now when actually you could, or like maybe you would fail but you would see what you were dealing with and pass the next time, for example. So you have to cut it one day, right? And the second very common pitfall is overestimating the grammar accuracy at the cost of ignoring all the other categories, and then maybe failing because of a category that you didn't even know was being tested. Yeah, so that's the most common ones. And a take-home message: if you did take Norskprøve, you didn't get the muntlig level that you wanted, do contact your exam place, ask them for the copy of your vurderingsskjema, so that you get clarity rather than the emotional I shouldn't have said that, done that. You will have clarity as to how they evaluated you in all these subcategories of the speaking, right? Very important. All right, that was it. Don't be afraid to reach out to me through Messenger, or if you're in my email database, just drop me an email if you're wondering about anything about Norskprøve. I wanted to open these short free consultations to assess your level quickly before the registration, but my calendar has been so booked these last 2 weeks that I wasn't able to open up for that. But I will open for one-off consultations later on during the month of November, and I do have a few spots for the Norskprøve program, the prep program with the videos about the tasks and about Norskprøve. It's for muntlig, right? And It's still for the introductory price, by the way, in this round. So let me know if you're wondering about anything. All right, that's it. I managed in just under an hour, and I'll see you next week on Wednesday for a Halloween live stream about the spooky stuff in learning Norwegian, the stuff you want to banish from your processes, the stuff that's hindering you and blocking you. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm wishing you luck with registering for Norskprøve if it's your call this time. Ha det så bra!